Good evening. I'm Dr. Carol Chapman, and you're tuned in to Lifeways, the health and wellness show we bring you each month, the fourth Wednesday of the month. Today, we will be talking about genetically modified foods. But let me introduce myself. I am a naturopathic physician practicing here in the southeast area of Portland in the Brooklyn neighborhood. My practice is of naturopathic medicine, and I focus on prevention, and also my focus is on health, not on disease. So I see patients of all different ages, different conditions. And so this is why I am bringing this information to you on a regular basis to inform you so that you can engage in your own health care and that you can encourage and take care of your family and your neighbors and your community to do the same. This is also a call-in show, so I would like to remind you of the numbers. Please call in, ask your questions and comments as well. So you can reach us at 503-288-4448. That's 503-288-4448 or 503-288-4442. So looking forward, we have been doing a number of different topics, largely around nutrition and food so far. And I would like to take you now into this very important area of understanding that what you see on the shelves in the supermarket or in the produce aisle may not exactly be what you think it is. And this is very important to understand because we are talking about genetically modified foods. So, what are genetically modified foods? Well, genetically modified foods, or more precisely, genetically modified organisms, is a result of a laboratory process where genes from the DNA of one species is extracted and artificially introduced or forced into the DNA of a completely unrelated species, or could be a plant or an animal. So these foreign genes may come from a bacteria, it can come from a virus, or it can even come from humans. Here I am sharing with you an idea of how foreign genes from one species is added to the genetic composition of another species. Now, does that sound even a little bit right or maybe a little bit strange to you? Let us see. GMO can also, the genetically modified organism, are also known as genetic engineering, or you can hear of genetic modification. They're all talking about the same things that we just defined, where genetic information from one species is being introduced into another species. And this is actually a manipulation of nature, really the natural order of things, in the sense that nature has over 8,004,000 different types of organisms, from plants, animals, insects, birds, etc. And it is this genetic information that defines one species from another. So even within, say, plants kingdom, we have so many different types of plants. And even within one group, say, for example, flowers, we have so many different kinds of flowers. I mean, you can think of just any bouquet that you look at, you may see maybe 3, 4, 5 different flowers. There are roses, there are gardenias, there are tulips, there are ferns, etc. So why would we even begin to think that we need to transfer or meddle with the beauty, the natural beauty of nature that is so bountifully surrounding us, supporting us, giving us life? So this is the question I want you to keep in mind as we move forward in understanding why this artificial engineering has been allowed to take place. So this is something I'm bringing to your attention because it's been going on since the late 1990s. Since 1999, genetically modified organisms have been introduced into our food system, and this is a very serious threat to the entire ecology. So what are genes? Let's look briefly at the underlying science. Every plant and animal is made up of cells, and within the cells we have a central part that carries the genetic information. That is your DNA, and the DNA is a combination of discrete portions called genes. So one part is, we have 2 strands of DNA, this genetic information, and one is inherited from your mother and another is inherited from your father. So short DNA sequences are called genes. So what's the importance of genes? Well, genes are complex networks that are regulating and enabling all the processes of living organisms to take place. And take place not only within the particular species, but at the right time as well. So genes are what really make life happen. And you can think of it from breathing all the way to reproduction. So in whatever aspect you can think of life, we have a need this genetic expression from our DNA in order for life to continue. So genes are responsible for repair and production of new cells. They are also responsible for every 7 years we have basically a new body, because cell repair and cell reproduction is constantly going on daily, and this is important for the perpetuation of the individual and for the perpetuation of the species. It's also very important that the correct genetic blueprint is passed on from one cell to the next. So how is genetic engineering done? That's what we are focusing on here. That's because living organisms have a natural barrier. So in order to protect themselves against the introduction of genes that are different from that species, what genetic engineering does is force DNA from one species of one organism into another organism. And this method usually includes injection of these genetic strips using viruses or bacteria to infect the organism that is being implanted, the gene is being implanted. It can be applied as a coating on the DNA with tiny metallic pellets, and then those pellets are fired into the nucleus, injecting new DNA into a newly fertilized egg using a fine needle method, or using electrical shocks. So all these methods are, as they sound, entirely artificial and not at all how nature functions. So is this genetic engineering precise? No, it's not. The technology is actually very crude, and it's not possible to insert a new gene with any accuracy, as well as the transfer of one new gene can disrupt the finely controlled network of the DNA of an organism. Well, current understanding of DNA, how DNA works, is extremely limited, by the way. So we're actually shooting in the dark, so to speak. And as I said, the entire natural order of life on the planet is in the balance with this strange type of engineering. So any change to the DNA of an organism can have serious side effects that are impossible to predict and also impossible to control. So we're actually playing genetic roulette here, folks. The new gene could, for example, alter the chemical reactions within a cell or disturb the cell functions. It could lead to instability and the creation of new toxins, allergens, and changes in the nutritional value of the organism. Unpredictable results, right? Definitely not how an apple that is created and grown in nature would look. What about grafting of trees? You know, farmers over time, traditionally, have been doing a lot of breeding within the animal kingdom, as well as grafting trees to come up with various strains of different types of, say, apples, or different types of pears, or even different types of flowers. Well, genetic engineering is completely different from breeding and grafting. This traditional breeding carries no unique risk. It is possible, for example, to mate a pig to a new variety, but it is not possible to mate a pig to a potato or to a mouse. So even when species seem to be closely related, they do succeed in breeding the offspring, and that offspring is usually infertile. So the traditional breeding is within the same species, definitely not crossing over from one species to the other. Hi, this is Dr. Carol Chapman. If you've just tuned in, you're listening to LifeWays, the health and wellness show that engages you and informs you and empowers you in your own health care. This is also a call-in show, so I would like to remind you of the numbers. Please call in, ask your questions, and comments as well. So you can reach us at 503-288-4448. That's 503-288-4448 or 503-288-4442. Those of you, pardon me, who would like to reach us by email, the email is life_ways@yahoo.com. Thank you. As we continue on now, we were just talking about the artificial transfer of genes, that is genetic information, from one species to another. So the question is, why has this been allowed to be done, and why is it continuing? What are the benefits, if any, and what are the risks? And what do you need to know, and what can you do about this threat actually to your life and to life on the planet? So this is what we will be covering, and so let us move forward. So what combinations have the scientists tried? This genetic engineering or genetic modified organisms. So spider genes, for example, were inserted into goat DNA in hopes that the goat milk would contain spider web protein for the use in bulletproof vests. Crazy, isn't it? Cow genes turned pig skin into cowhide. Jellyfish genes lit up pig noses in the dark. Does that sound real? Arctic fish genes gave tomatoes and strawberries tolerance to frost. So these are some of the ideas that these scientists are experimenting with nature. In other words, not satisfied with the natural order of things, the beauty, the abundance, the flexibility, the endurance of nature, we have been tampering with nature, trying to do one up better than nature. That is so-called genetic scientists. Here are some of their field trials. Corn engineered with human genes, Dow, chemicals. Sugarcane engineered with human genes, Hawaii Agricultural Research Center. Corn engineered with jellyfish genes, Stanford University. Tobacco engineered with lettuce genes, University of Hawaii. Rice engineered with human genes, Applied Phytologics. Corn engineered with hepatitis virus genes, Prodigene. Potatoes that glow in the dark when they need watering, interesting. Human genes were inserted into corn to produce spermicide. Wow. Promises, promises. The current technology of genetically modified foods is based on an obsolete information and theory and is prone to dangerous side effects. So say many scientists on the other side of this topic. So economic interests have pushed it onto the market too soon. That's what the scientists who oppose genetically modified foods are telling us. So where are these genetically modified organisms? Actually, they're in your food. And that's why I am bringing this topic to your attention today so that we can take a closer look to see what really is in the supermarket being offered to us. So this was first introduced into our food supply in the mid-1990s, and the GMO are now present in the majority of processed foods in the U.S. Folks, I would like you to pay attention to the word processed. That's the key. GMO, or genetically modified organisms, are found precisely in processed foods. So that foods that are coming directly from nature, not processed in any way, is your safest route to avoid taking into your system these genetically modified organisms. There you are, genetically modified foods. They're right there in your shopping cart. I'm sorry to tell you, but I'm happy today to alert you to this growing danger. So here we are in 2012, and this has been in the food chain, the food system in the United States. I'm talking about here because we will see precisely that a lot of other countries have opted out of this experiment. So it's in the United States that this has been allowed to enter into the food system quietly, unbeknownst to many of us. So we need to get alert to what we are eating today. Here's a report. The conclusion of a report by several scientists says the UX experiment with genetically engineered food has been a failure. It impacts on the environment, on the food system, on public health, and are not fully documented, but are clearly not worth it. It is time for a new approach to biotechnology in the food system. That came from Food and Water Watch report. Do Europeans know something about these GM foods that we don't? Well, while they are banned as food ingredients in Europe and elsewhere, that is genetically modified foods, the FDA does not even require the labeling of GMO food ingredients in the United States. And the FDA means Food and Drug Administration. That is the federal agency that is supposed to be protecting the interest of the public, that's you and me and everyone, that we are eating safe, nutritious foods. That has not been the case. They have not even required that there be labeling on these foods so that when we walk into the supermarket, we can see GMO on the label and we can make a choice, whether we want to go with GMO or we want to go with non-GMO. So, my dear friends, what has happened here is choice, democratic choice, has been removed from us involuntarily, and we are still in the dark, no labels. Europe has refused these genetically modified food imports. Absolutely. Not only Europe, many other countries. So why is GMO organisms have been added to your food? Well, there are claims of the biotech company Monsanto back then in the late 1990s that their mission was to feed the world, right? This was supposed to address world hunger. They were going to increase agriculture productivity, and it was going to increase nutritional benefits by adding GMO to our food. But the two main traits that Monsanto has added to the crops to date are herbicidal tolerance and the ability of plants to produce their own pesticides. So we hear a lot the warning, especially in the natural medicine, preventative medicine circles, that we are taking in a lot of herbicides and pesticides in our foods. We are facing diseases that we have never heard before, or parents, great-grandparents, and their great-grandparents have never seen some of these diseases and challenges that we are facing with our health today. For example, the assault on the immune system, which has become overwhelmed by all these different strange proteins in the environment and in our food, just to name two areas. So it's worth thinking about this in these terms. That is, where are these assaults coming from? Why are we seeing so much autoimmune disease? The whole entry into the scene of immune challenging conditions, where has all this come from? Let us continue. So these results form actually a giant experiment on the entire ecological system. And this includes humans. we have no health benefits, only economic benefits from genetically modified foods. In fact, we will see shortly, we are actually facing a lot of health risks, as I mentioned a few examples just now. There is something called the precautionary principle that was used by many countries when the whole idea of genetically modified organisms came on the scene. And that's a simple precautionary principle that, you know, your grandma said to you, look before you leap. It's just a simple precaution. So when you apply this to the genetically modified organism industry, let's see. So the only prudent course of action is not to proceed with something that has potential risk and only potential benefits until you know a bit more about it. That's the precautionary principle. So countries may use this precautionary principle to approach the whole idea of genetically modified foods in choosing to allow these products to come into their territories. Well, 175 countries signed several international treaties, along which and including the Cartagena Biosafety Protocol. The U.S. is the only country that fully embraced the genetically modified foods without any precaution on a governmental level. Just as there is a lack of proof of safety, there is a glaring lack of proof of benefits. So do not think that we are asleep, though, because there has been a lot of protests and there's been a lot of action in the United States around this whole question of genetically modified foods. It's been on the stage for a long time, and it's time that it gets even wider action behind it. And that's why we're talking about this topic today. Here you see a group protesting genetically modified foods in our supermarket in Chicago. So why are there no labelings to the genetically modified foods? Let's see the answer to that question. Currently, here are the commercialized crops. That is the crops that are genetically modified in the United States. Soy is 94% genetically modified. That is 94% of all the soy grown in the United States is genetically modified soy. Cotton, 90%, canola, 90%, sugar beet, 95%. So that's where a lot of our sugar comes from. Corn, 88%. Hawaiian papayas, more than 50% are genetically modified. Zucchini, yellow squash, we have about 24,000 acres of farmland planted with genetically modified zucchini and yellow squash. There you have it, my friends. Okay, let me give you our call-in numbers again. This is Lifeways Health and Wellness Show. I'm Dr. Carol Chapman, and we're talking about genetically modified foods, their implication for life and for the planet. Please call in with your questions and comments to 503-288-4448 or 503-288-4442. Here are some products that are derived from these 8 genetically modified crops in the United States. We have oils that are produced from canola, such as canola oil. We have soy protein, soy sauce, and various other types of soy products that is produced from genetically modified soy, cornstarch, corn syrup, and there are a whole host of invisible ingredients that you can't really tell looking at the label that they are coming from these genetically modified crops. But there's a whole list that I'm going to refer you to so that you can become savvy about this and actually copy this list, download it, and carry it with you when you go to the supermarket so that you can watch out for these hidden genetically modified ingredients. So why should you care? This looks kind of scary, right? You don't want your child eating foods that could actually disrupt their health and jeopardize their lives. Certainly not. So that's one reason why you should care, because studies show that genetically modified foods produce toxic allergic reactions. They create sickness and sterility in livestock. In fact, many livestock die when they eat genetically modified foods. And they have found that the genetically modified foods damage virtually every organ in the animals that are studied in the laboratory that are fed these GMO products. For example, sheep in India died in thousands after feeding on a GMO cotton field. After the harvest, the farmers allowed the sheep to go into the field and feed on the remnants, and the sheep died in thousands. Do we have a call?
Hello? Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Please go ahead.
Sure. I recently heard that Monsanto bought a company that was coming out with research against them in terms of they were producing information that stated that the reason the bees are dying off is because the pesticides were actually, or the chemicals were actually in the DNA of the plants that Monsanto creates. Do you know any more information about this?
Yes, I was just looking at a video clip today, and there's a whole article about this on Mercola.com where it shows that the bees have been dying off for a long time, as well as the monarch butterflies. And farmers saw this phenomena, especially, of course, the bee farmers who have aviaries, and they could not understand this. And now these scientists have verified that this is exactly what happens. You see, because one of the major problems is that the genetically modified foods or plants are being pollinated by the bees. The bees just enter into a field and they carry the pollen from one plant to another. So the bees are carrying the pollen of these toxic plants. Remember I said that the two traits that Monsanto has been able to achieve so far is to produce these plants that have produce their own pesticides, and produce the plants in such a way that you don't have to add outside additional herbicides. So inherently the plants are toxic. And that's why those sheep in India died, because they ate those toxic plants. So the bees also are dying because they are taking the pollen from these toxic plants. The butterflies are landing on these toxic plants. And worse, the pollination is being transported from the GMO toxic plants to normal natural plants. So here it is, we have a situation that is uncontrollable, because the natural function of the bees is to carry and cross-pollinate plants in this way. Another way it is done is through the wind carrying the pollen from one farm in the air to thousands of miles away. So this is the ploy that Monsanto has actually used, that is to buy up any kind of threat to them, such as this company that you mentioned. They have even bought out farmers and who are not using their seeds, or they have tried to force to use their seeds and actually have put them out of business. So there is a whole history behind this, and I know today we will just be touching this topic. But please just put in Monsanto and you will see, just on the internet, or go to the Institute of Responsible Technology, and they have a wonderful website with a lot of information about this.
Thank you very much. What other solutions do you see? What other things would you like to see happen in order to take care of the Monsanto problem? In other words, what's the solution?
Well, I will be going a little bit into this as we move on from here, but the solution is actually not with the government. The solution is with us. Right. We have been that choice of what we eat and what's in our food has been taken away from us, and we are going to have to get in action, educate ourselves, find the non-GMO foods, choose those foods, buy those foods, and the market will feel it. They cannot afford not to change. That's what the food manufacturers are going to have to be forced to do in the United States. That's exactly what happened in Europe.
And they ended up booting out Monsanto?
Pardon me?
Monsanto ended up getting kicked out of Europe?
Well, Europe has refused to import U.S. foods.
Yeah, I've heard that about Germany anyways, that they refuse to have any GMO foods. That's correct, right?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, well...
You're welcome.
Are they required to label GMO foods on the label?
No, they're not required to do that. I'm going to be talking a little bit about that in a few minutes.
Okay.
The FDA, who should be the agency enforcing that on our behalf for safety and protection, have not.
I see.
And they have no indication that they plan to do that.
Very good. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. This is Lifeways. I'm Dr. Carol Chapman. We are talking about genetically modified foods. If you're just joining us, this is a live call-in show. Please give us a call at 503-288-4448 or 503-288-4442. Yes, please go ahead. We have another caller.
Hi, hello, great show.
Sure, please, go ahead.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about genetically modified organisms in food.
Pardon me, I can hardly hear you.
Okay, so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about genetically modified foods. Are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. So when you said something about the pollination of genetically modified foods or food in general, I'm under... It's hard to say thousands of miles because of pollination, because once the corn pollen gets into the jet stream, it will actually go around the world. So things from China and all that stuff will be pollinating our crops, organic crops here, anywhere around in the world because of the jet stream, and it has to just get up in the jet stream the way it goes. And that's something very concerning to me. Also, me being a bee farmer, I'm concerned about the pollination of my crops and having, my next-door neighbors spraying chemicals and having genetically modified organisms in their crops. And it's really difficult to find out how I can prevent their waste product from coming into my food systems. And that's something that that terrifies me as well on a daily basis. And the previous caller was talking about what can we do. And sometimes I feel a little helpless because Clarence Thomas of the Supreme Court Justice used to be Monsanto's lawyer. So they have entrenched themselves into the FDA, who allows BPAs for children's bottles, but won't say no to genetically modified foods, which lead to inflammation of the tissues and diabetes. So,
caller, you have raised a couple of topics. Let's go back to the beginning. We've got about 3-4 things going on here. So
sure, and I just wanted to say, last thing is the pharma food. Watch out for the pharma foods, which they're piggybacking vegetables with blood thinners and heart medications, because it's easy to splice in the DNA of the plants instead of trees and shrubs. So I just wanted to get those out there, and it's just fighting every day to keep our crops clean and our children healthy. So thank you so much for carrying on with the show, and I'll take all my answers off the air.
We are actually on one planet, and that whatever we do or think, we are affecting every other person and part of the planet. So this idea about the pollination from one farm going into another, and accusing a farmer of having genetically modified plants, although they have not bought the seeds from Monsanto, and carrying them to court and wiping the farmers out of their livelihood in this way is just on the level of criminal. That is where that kind of thinking and action reside. So the other piece about the monarch butterfly, it's the same thing that's happening. And yes, there are lots of farmers that have organized around these issues, because, as I said, this has been going on since 1999, when genetically modified organisms was introduced into the food crop in the United States. So there is a lot of organization around this. This is where you as a farmer could reach out and find out more among the bee farmers, because this information that has now come out definitely supports the claim that these farmers have known and suspected for a long time. And now what we can do, yes, there are a lot of things that we can do, but we need to stop looking to the government to change because we say so or because we even ask. Yes, there is a democratic process, but just as was pointed out, the attorneys from Monsanto is now the vice president of food safety in this administration. I mean, what is that? That's like having the fox in the hen house, so to speak. So this is clearly a situation where we are not going to change it just by reaching out and demanding, although we should continue to make our voices heard, but we really need to organize and take action on our own, on an individual level, and definitely on a community and a local level. And this is happening all over the country, actually. So this is why I am bringing this topic today, so that we can again get it to the forefront that folks who are not understanding that their lives are actually being put in danger can have this understanding, engage, and decide to use their pocketbook, so to speak, to take action and not purchase these genetically modified foods. So this is why we should care, because GMO is actually been shown to create toxic allergic reactions. They have killed and left livestock sterilized. Laboratory animals have also been showed sterility. There was a big study in Russia showing hamsters that by the third generation they were sterile, and the parents had shorter lives. They had lower weight and did not thrive. So there are a lot of studies that is supporting the viciousness of the effects of genetically modified foods on both animals and plants. So this question of safety, well, the American Academy of Environmental Studies doesn't think so. I mean, the claim that genetically modified foods are safe by Monsanto. What they are saying is that there have been several reports that there are lots of risks to genetically modified foods, including fertility, immune problems, faulty insulin regulation. I'm talking about blood sugar regulation. We see so much of that in the community in terms of high, low blood sugar problems. Diabetes is just a wash in this country. So we need to ask questions deeper as to why is it some of these things, some of these conditions, some of these diseases are so rampant. Could it be that we've been taking in foods that have set us up to have and are now expressing some of these conditions? So here's the warning of the American Environmental Association. Change in major organs, and especially in the GI, which is the gastrointestinal system, have been observed. They have also asked physicians to advise their patients or advise people to avoid genetically modified foods. So take a look at this. What you see is not what you get. Look at that banana. Look at that orange. Look at the so-called pomegranate, the apple. Completely strange looking and strange foods. Hello, caller. Please go ahead. We have another caller.
Hi, I had a question about produce specifically. I've heard that there are the number codes on there differentiate between GMO, organic, and conventionally grown. Do you know those codes off the top of your head, or?
I have not heard of those codes, no.
Okay, I think they're available online if people want to look that up so that they can actually read on the products now, or on the produce specifically. I don't think produce or products.
Does the codes have a name?
It's numbers. They're numbers. You know how there's like when you have an apple, for example, and you type in the number on the produce, you know, the sticker?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
On that number, it tells you whether or not it's organic or not based upon that number.
Okay. That's good to know. So how would the consumer looking at that number be able to tell?
Well, there's a certain I think it's the first 3 digits of that number correlate to whether it's organic, conventional grown, or GMO, and that's where they can get that online. They just look it up. You put in like produce codes or something organic in search.
Is there a listing that say they could download and take with them to the supermarket?
Well, if they just know the key, then they should be able to remember it. It's not like really specific. It's like 9, starting with 9s. It's like organic, and conventions like 8s, and I think 4 is GMO. So it's the PLU code.
Okay. All right. That's what I'm asking. All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We'll look into that.
Okay. Thanks. Bye.
Sure. So here we have another opinion on genetically modified foods. I strongly believe that one of the most obvious clues about the danger of genetically modified organisms, foods, are that just about every species of animal that is offered a GMO food versus a non-GMO food will avoid the GMO one. So many times they will do this to the point of starvation, as they have an intuitive sense of the danger of this food. That's Dr. Mercola. Here are some resources I would like to share with you. Please go to IRT, the Institute of Responsible Technology, and you will be able to see on their website these different topics on corn damage. Corn damage damages liver and kidney. Meat raised on GMO is different. Genetically modified soy is linked to sterility. So here are our frankenfoods, folks. Is that a lemon? Folks, I just got brought to my attention that the Consumer Reports have these PLU numbers that you can look up, and there are 5-digit numbers that start with 9. That means that it's organic. A 5-digit number that starts with 8 means that the item is genetically modified. So that's from consumerreports.org. So there are rampant conflicts of interest around this whole topic of genetically modified foods. I am just mentioning a few here. The U.S. government is in a position to make responsible decisions around genetically modified foods. So why are they not doing that? They're not because the former Monsanto Vice President, Michael Taylor, is now in charge of food safety, as I mentioned before. In the present administration, the Supreme Court Judge Clarence Thomas is a former attorney with Monsanto, and he refuses to admit conflict of interest in the ruling on GMA, genetically modified alfalfa. Conflict of interest are found at every level, from research to the regulatory agencies. And so we have to ask the question, who profits and who is harmed? So my message to you today is to take action. It's time to save yourselves, your family. The key to ending this genetically modified organism atrocities is not to rely on the government to make for you the changes that needs to be made. You need to educate yourself, your community, and most of all, you have to take action through your food purchases so we can stop this unregulated scientific experiment on us. Is this our future, folks? The tipping point will come when about 5% of us stop buying genetically modified food. Only 5% can do it. And the market has to respond. They really cannot afford to. Remember, there are only 8 genetically modified crops. The thing is that there are so many other unseen ingredients in food that are made from genetically modified foods. So I'm recommending that you go to the website that I shared with you, and on there you will find a list that leads you, a link, pardon me, that leads you to a list of all these ingredients that are genetically modified. Please, no genetically modified foods. That is the habit that we need to form. I want to leave you with a sense of hope looking at the bigger picture. This is an assault on Mother Nature. This is a one-upmanship on Mother Nature, that scientists, us with a limited human mind, with a limited human senses, can even be audacious enough to think that we can do better than nature, that we need to manipulate nature, that we need to change things for profit. Folks, Mother Nature is not asleep. Look at the earth changes that are happening all around you. The tornadoes, the tsunamis, the floods, the earthquakes, the famines. I leave you with that for food for thought. Mother Nature is taking care of business, and we need to do the same. We need to change. This is a time of change that is coming upon us, and we need to be participants, not to be taken by surprise, asleep at the wheel. Thank you, folks, and see you next month when we will be talking about another important topic, water. What's happening to our water supply worldwide and how water has become a commodity. Why are you buying water in water bottles? This is Dr. Carol Chapman, naturopathic physician. This is Lifeways, the health and wellness show, coming to you each month. Tune in next month, 4th Wednesday. Thank you.